Welcome to my channel, Ethio TechnoTube. If you are new for the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will get notified when I post additional videos regarding to the object-oriented program. So today we will going to cover exception in Java programming. So we're going to start from the meaning of exception in Java programming, and we will see the reason behind exceptions, and we will see types of exception, and finally we're going to have a sample Java program. So stay with me till the end of the video. Exception, making mistakes is a norm rather than exception, especially in programming. Nothing we do or build is ever perfectly correct, and we can see all computer softwares, no matter how well they are designed, there is always a chance that some kind of error will arise during its execution. An exception can be described as an erroneous or anomalous condition that arises while a program is running. So a well-designed program should include a code to guard against errors and other exceptional conditions when they arise. That exception should have to be rationally managed. So exception is any abnormal or any unwanted events or some extraordinary condition that occur at runtime. So it interrupts the normal flow of execution of the program, as the exception we're going to terminate or halt the program. When an exception occurs in our Java program, a system-generated error will be displayed in our console. In Java, exceptions are represented by a class that inherits from the java.lang.exception class. So when an exceptional situation occurs, such as division by zero, array index out-of-bound exceptions, file not found exception, so an exception object will be created automatically, and so on. Why does an exception occur? What's behind the exception? The first, wrong data entered by the user. We may declare a variable to be integer, but the user may going to enter string or a character, so wrong data has been entered. The file we want to load may be missing or in the wrong format. If we are just reading certain text file, and if the existing file is not having the extension .txt, or if the file name didn't match with the existing file, so exception will going to happen. The other, trying to access an out-of-bounds array element. As array is a data structure that enables us to store different values of having the same data type. So they do have the array size. So if you are just trying to access out of the array size, which is there is no any element which resides there in that index, so array index array out of bounds exception will going to happen. So exception handling enables us to create applications that can resolve the exception. The main thing we have to understand right here, we're not going to eliminate the exception, but we're going to rationally handle the exception. So we cannot eliminate the exception, but we can be able to rationally handle the exceptions. So exception handling enables developers to write robust and fault-tolerant applications that can notify the user before they terminate the program. Right here, if we don't have any code that guard the exception, the program will going to terminate or halt. But right here, we're going to notify the user before that program will going to terminate due to the exceptions. So Java program with exception handling notify the user about the mistake happens with the input. So let's see error and exception handling. Error occurred in a program can be of two types: syntax error and runtime errors. Syntax error, they are known as compile time error, which mainly occurs during the compilation of the program. So they will going to detect it while the Java program will be converted to its corresponding bytecode, or we can call it in compilation phase. Thus, errors are mainly arise due to improper syntax in our Java program or C++ or any programming. So like missing semicolon, like misbalanced parentheses, wrongly spelled keywords, illegal identifiers, misbalanced curly braces. So thus errors are due to the syntax error. So there is any misspelled keyword or illegal identifier used in while declaring a variable or while declaring a certain method, right? So when a syntax error occurs, the compiler shows us an error message specifically to the line where the error occurs. So it may show red line, but it depends on the programming language. So the compiler will show us an error message with red line inside the line which has a certain syntax error. To fix such type of errors, we need to review our code and correct the syntax depending on the rule of programming language we are just utilizing. The other runtime errors, as the name indicates, they occur at runtime rather than in the compilation phase, which means they will be detected in the phase in which our processor executes the actual task. There may be certain division by zero exception, so it will be detected while the processor executes the actual division task, not in the compilation phase. So such type of errors happen due to trial of program to do something which is out of rule, just like division by zero, trying to access the local resource without having privilege. Those errors are mainly detected by the Java virtual machine while executing the program or while they are executing the actual task. The other logic errors. Such type of error occur when the program doesn't work as unintended, even though it may be free of the syntax and runtime errors. Such type of errors may be free from both syntax and runtime errors, but they are not providing the intended output. They are just providing us the wrong output, even though they are correct both in syntax and runtime errors, or they don't have any syntax error or they don't have any runtime errors. They are somehow difficult to correct such type of errors. So the programmer is required to review his code in detail to take such errors that cause them to produce unintended result or incorrect result. So let's see the exception handling overview. Exception handling enables programmers to handle and recover a program from runtime errors or exceptional situations that may occur during the execution of a program. Exception handling enables us to create applications that can resolve or handle exception in somehow rational manner. So right here we have task T. Right here we have task T. If this task T did not execute correctly, which means if task T throws an exception, perform error processing will be executed. Or else, which means if there is no any exception thrown in this task T, the next task will be implemented, which means this error processing will not be executed or will be bypassed. And the other, it will going to try to perform the next task T1. If T1 throws an exception, again, error processing will going to be executed. If not, which means if there is no any exception thrown inside this task one, the next process will be executed. So normally Java exception handling will be managed with 5 keywords: try, catch, throw, and throws, and finally keyword. These are the keyword which will be used in any exception handling in Java programming. So let's see try block. This block encloses the code that may potentially throw an exception. Right here, we're going to enclose a certain statement which we think potentially throw an exception with a try block. So this try block can be followed by one or more corresponding catch block or a finally block. So right here, the statement that we expect to throw an exception will be enclosed within a try block, try, curly brace, and right here, try, curly brace, and statements will be written inside these curly braces. So that any statement that is potentially, so that can potentially throw an exception will be written inside this curly brace. The catch, if a certain exception is thrown inside this try block, this catch block will going to handle that specific exceptions that occur within what? Within the corresponding try block. So it specifies the type of exception to catch and provides a code to handle the exception. As I have told you before, if exception occurs, automatically an exception object will be created and will be thrown. So that exception will be handled in the catch block. Catch, then curly brace, and we're going to close the curly brace right here. So in the middle, any statement that have to be displayed to the user, that has to notify the user, will be written right here. So we will going to manage the exception in somehow rational manner. This catch block is used to catch and handle specific exceptions that occur within the corresponding try block. So it specifies the type of exception to catch and provides a code to handle exception. So right here we can have multiple catch block can be used to handle different type of exception. So a single statement may be potentially throw more than one exception. So we will going to have what? More than one catch blocks. The other finally block. This block is optional. It's not mandatory. It is used to specify the code that should be executed regardless of whether an exception occurs or not. Right here, any statement which is enclosed in the finally block will be executed regardless of the exception. Whether there is an exception or not, they will going to be executed. So this finally block may be used to release a certain resource, or may be used to perform certain clearing operation, or it may be used to close a connection. For example, it can be used in socket programming. So when an exception is thrown, the Java runtime system searches for a suitable catch block that can handle the exception based on the type of exception thrown. If the matching catch block is found, the corresponding catch block will be executed. If no suitable catch block is found, the exception is propagated back to the call stack until it is caught or the program will going to terminate. If there is no any corresponding catch block that match with the thrown exception inside the try block. So let's see exception flow of try, catch, and the finally block. We have a try block right here. We have a try block right here. And if no exception occur, or if no exception thrown inside the try block, directly the code which resides in the finally block will be executed. What if exception caught right here in the try block? If exception is caught, or if exception is thrown in the try block, the corresponding catch block which matches with the thrown exception will going to be executed. The code under this catch block will be executed, and finally the code which resides in the finally block will be executed. So whether there is an exception or not, the code which resides in the finally block will be executed. So the general form is as such. We have try, we have curly braces, and we have codes that may throw an exception, and we do have catch, exception type, and exception object. As I've told you before, when exception occurs, an exception object will going to be automatically created and thrown. So exception handling code will be written right here, and finally block will be written right here, and the code which has to be executed whether there is an exception or not will be written inside this curly brace. So let's see types of exceptions. We do have checked exception and unchecked exception. Checked exception, they are checked at compile time. If some code within a method throws checked exception, then the method must either handle the exception or it must specify the exception using throws keyword. We can use throw keyword and throws keyword to throw an exception. So throws keyword can be used as to declare an exception. Throw keyword can be used to manually throw an exception in the class. So such type of errors are considered as checked because the compiler checks their presence and enforces handling or declaration. Let's consider an analogy, a driver analogy. So before his journey, he is expected to check his fuel, right? But he is not sure whether his tire will going to burst in his journey. So such type of exception can be input output exception, SQL exception when we want to manipulate database. So we're going to use SQL. So SQL exception are under this checked exception. So we have to declare the exception and we have to catch the exception, right? The other class not found exception and file not found exception. Right here, we may be trying to access a certain file and write certain text upon or append a certain text with the existing one. So that file may not found due to its file name error, due to its format error. So such exception should have to be declared and should have to be handled. So the compiler will going to enforce us to handle or to declare the exception. The other unchecked exceptions. Thus, exceptions are not checked at compile time. In C++, or exceptions are unchecked, so the programmer is not forced by the compiler to either handle or specify the exception. So it's up to the program to be civilized and specify or catch the exceptions. So the compiler will not going to check their presence and will not going to enforce us to declare and handle the exceptions. Thus, exceptions are typically caused by programming errors or conditions that are not expected to occur under normal circumstance. Arithmetic exception can be under this unchecked exception, division by zero, null pointer exception. If we are just going to count the number of characters with a null string, null pointer exception will going to happen. Array index out of bounds exception. If we are just trying to access the element which doesn't exist or which is out of bound, array index out of bound exception will going to happen. Illegal argument exceptions. Right here, we may be sending an invalid argument to the method. When we invoke a method, we are just going to send argument which match with the data type and the number of parameter which is declared in the method definition. So illegal argument may be sent when we invoke the method. So here is a sample Java program. This is uncount exception. We do have a class name divide. We have a class name divide, and we have local variables right here. Int x is initialized to be 0, and y is initialized to be 7. And we do have a third local variable, which is c, y over x, but x is a denominator, so we cannot going to divide a number with 0. This is mathematically incorrect. So when we run this program, such type of error is displayed, which indicates us there is an exception division by 0. So the program terminated. Right here we try to count an exception to handle an exception. So we have the same thing. We have two variables right here, and we enclose a statement. This is a statement which throws an exception right here because the denominator is 0. So we have to enclose this statement with a try block. Try to do this statement. Try this statement. If exception is thrown, the corresponding catch block will going to handle such exceptions. So right here we are just handling arithmetic exceptions. So catch arithmetic exception e system.out.println divide by 0 exception. Actually it terminates, but what differentiates this program from this one is that we can be able to rationally handle the exception, or we make the program to rationally terminate with notifying the user what sort of exception that happens right here. So right here we notify the user that divide by 0 exception occurs. So the user may update its value, its x value right here. So thanks for staying with me till the end of the lesson. If you didn't subscribe my channel yet, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will get notified when I post additional videos regarding to Java programming. Until I get you with the new lesson, stay calm. Have a nice day.